Jake Martinez stood in front of the mirror in his small room on the space station. His hands shook as he tried to fix his tie. 3 months ago, he was building houses on Earth. Now he was going to watch aliens try to make peace. This is crazy, he said to himself. Jake was 34 years old and had worked construction for 15 years. He knew nothing about talking to aliens or making deals between different worlds. The door chimed. "Come in," Jake called Ambassador Helen Carter. Walked into his room. She was tall, with gray hair and sharp eyes. Helen had been a diplomat for 20 years. She made it look easy. "Ready for your first day, Jake?" she asked. "I think so," Jake said. He still felt nervous. "Are you sure they picked the right guy?" "I came last in my class at the academy," Helen smiled. "Sometimes the best person for a job is not the one with the best grades. You have something the others don't." "What's that?" "You're real. You don't talk like a robot reading from a book. The aliens might like that." Jake had joined the diplomatic training program by accident. He was fixing the roof at the academy when a teacher heard him talking to his crew. The teacher liked how Jake solved problems and got people to work together. Before Jake knew it, he was in classes learning about alien cultures. The classes were hard. Jake struggled with the formal language and complex rules. Other students had gone to fancy schools. They knew history and politics. Jake knew how to build things and fix problems. "Tell me about today again," Jake said. Helen sat down. "We're on Harmony Point, a neutral space station. 2 alien species are here to talk about ending their war. The Cytherians and the Eldorians have been fighting for 300 years. That's a long time to be angry at someone." "Yes, it is." "The Cytherians look like big insects. They work together like a team, always thinking about their group first. The Eldorians look like living crystals made of light. They value individual achievement and honor." Jake nodded. He had studied both species, but it was hard to remember all the rules about how to act around them. "Your job is simple," Helen continued. "Watch and learn. Don't talk unless someone asks you a direct question. Don't touch anything. Don't eat their food. Don't make any deals." "Got it." "Watch, don't touch, don't talk, don't eat. Most importantly, don't do anything that might insult them. These peace talks are very fragile. One wrong move could start the war again." Jake's stomach felt tight. "What if I mess up?" "You won't. Just be yourself, but quietly." They left Jake's room and walked through the space station. Harmony Point was built specifically for meetings like this. It had areas designed for different types of aliens. The walls could change color and temperature. The air could be adjusted for different species. They reached the main meeting room. Through the clear walls, Jake could see the 2 alien groups. On opposite sides of a large table, the Cytherians did look like giant insects. They were about 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and hard shell-like skin. Their eyes were large and black. They moved in perfect coordination, like dancers who had practiced together for years. The Eldorians were beautiful and strange. They looked like people made of colored glass, with light glowing inside them. They changed color when they moved or spoke. Each one looked different, with unique patterns of light flowing through their crystal bodies. "Wow," Jake whispered. "Remember, just observe," Helen said. They entered the room. The formal introductions began. Ambassador Carter spoke for the humans. The aliens had translators that turned their languages into English. Zethkar was the Cytherian leader. He spoke in a buzzing voice that came from his whole body, not just his mouth. "We come seeking end to conflict, but Eldorians must accept responsibility for invasion of sacred breeding worlds." Vorn Stellax was the Eldorian admiral. His voice sounded like music made of light. "Cytherians speak of invasion, but we claim only empty space. We cannot invade what belongs to no one." Jake listened as they argued about the same things they had argued about for centuries. The Cytherians said the Eldorians had taken their planets. The Eldorians said the planets were empty and belonged to whoever found them first. As the morning went on, Jake noticed something. Both groups were frustrated that they seemed to be talking about different things. It was like his construction crews when the electricians and plumbers argued about whose job it was to run wires through walls. During a break, Jake watched the aliens in the hallway. The Cytherians stayed together in a tight group, talking in low buzzes. The Eldorians spread out, each one standing alone, their lights dimmed. They're both scared, Jake realized. Helen looked at him. What do you mean? Look at them. The bug. Guys stick together because they're worried about being alone. The crystal guys stand apart because they're worried about losing themselves in a group. They're afraid of the same thing, just from opposite sides. Helen stared at Jake. That's actually a very good observation. When the talks resumed in the afternoon, Jake paid more attention to how the aliens acted than what they said. The Cytherians kept looking at each other before speaking, like they were checking if their group agreed. The Eldorians never looked at each other, like they were afraid of copying someone else's ideas. The arguments got louder. Sethkar's shell turned darker. Vorn's lights flashed red. This is pointless, Vorn declared. Cytherians will never understand individual rights. Eldorians care nothing for community responsibility. Sethkar buzzed angrily. Ambassador Carter tried to calm them down, but Jake could see the talks were falling apart. 300 years of war, and they still couldn't agree on anything. That evening, Jake sat in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the stars. He thought about his old construction job. When two crews argued, it was usually because they had different goals. The electricians wanted clean wire runs. The plumbers wanted straight pipes. Both were right, but they couldn't both get what they wanted in the same wall space. The solution was usually simple. Find a way for both crews to win, or build a bigger wall. Jake wondered if the same thing might work with aliens. But Helen had been clear. Watch and learn, don't get involved. Still, as he looked out at the vast space between the stars, Jake couldn't help thinking there was enough room out there for everyone. The next morning brought disaster. Jake woke up to alarms blaring throughout the station. He rushed to get dressed and found Ambassador Carter in the hallway. What's happening? Jake asked. The talks broke down completely last night. Both sides are threatening to leave, Helen said, walking quickly toward the conference room. Can they do that? Unfortunately, yes. And if they leave now, the war will probably go on for another 300 years. They reached the main area, where both alien groups were packing their things. The Cytherians moved together like an angry swarm. The Eldorians flashed bright red and orange colors. Perhaps we try again in 50 years, Sethkar said to Ambassador Carter, when Eldorians learn wisdom. Cytherians speak of wisdom, but show none, Vorn replied, his crystal body blazing white. With anger, Jake watched the aliens prepare to leave. All this way for nothing. He thought about construction projects that fell apart because teams couldn't work together. Usually, it was because nobody took time to understand what the other guy was trying to build. Ambassador Carter, Jake said, quietly, what if we had dinner together tonight? All of us? Helen looked at him like he was crazy. Jake, they can barely stand to be in the same room. That's the problem. They're treating each other like enemies instead of people. Back home, when my crews were fighting, I'd take them all out for pizza. Hard to stay mad at someone when you're sharing food. This is different, Jake. These are ancient enemies with completely different cultures. Maybe. But they both eat, right? They both need to rest? They're not that different. Helen sighed. Even if I agreed, which I don't, there are dozens of protocols for interspecies dining. One wrong move and we could insult everyone. What if we kept it simple? Just food and talking? Before Helen could answer, Captain Lisa Stone approached them. She commanded the human ship that brought them here. Ambassador, both groups are requesting transport back to their home worlds. Captain Stone said. Helen closed her eyes for a moment. Give me 2 hours. Let me try something. Jake spent the afternoon learning everything he could about alien food customs. It was confusing. Cytherians shared food to show trust. Eldorians ate alone to show independence. How could he feed both groups without insulting someone? Finally, he had an idea. It was probably stupid, but it might work. That evening, Jake set up dinner in the station's main dining area. He arranged the tables in a strange way. One big table in the middle with smaller tables around it, close enough to talk, but far enough. Apart to feel separate, the aliens arrived looking suspicious. Ambassador Carter looked nervous. Welcome, Jake said. I know you're all leaving tomorrow, but I wanted to say thank you for letting me watch your meetings. I learned a lot. He had prepared food from Earth, simple things like bread, soup, and dan. Vegetables, nothing fancy or complicated. I'm not much of a cook, Jake admitted. Back home, I usually just made sandwiches for my construction crew, but I thought you might be hungry. Jake served the food in a way he hoped wouldn't offend anyone. He put dishes on the big center table that everyone could see, but he also gave each person their own plate and space. The Cytherians buzzed quietly among themselves. The Eldorians flickered with cautious colors. Please, eat whatever you want, however you want, Jake said. No rules tonight. To his surprise, Zethkar took some bread from the center table. He broke it into pieces and shared it with the other Cytherians. Vorn took some soup, but ate it alone at his smaller table. Jake sat down with his own simple meal. You know, I've been thinking about your war. Ambassador Carter kicked him under the table, but Jake continued. I used to build houses. Before I started, I always had to understand what the land was like. Sometimes 2 families wanted to build on the same hill. They'd fight about it, saying the other family couldn't understand how to use the land properly. The aliens listened, while they ate. But usually, the problem wasn't the land. It was that they were trying to build different things. One family wanted a house with a big garden. The other wanted a house with a workshop. Both were good ideas, but they couldn't both fit in the same small space. What did you do? Vorn asked, his color shifting to curious blue. Found them a bigger hill, or helped them see that a garden and a workshop could actually work well together. Zethkar tilted his large head. You speak of cooperation. But how? Does garden help workshop? Well, the workshop family could fix tools for the garden family. The garden family could grow food for the workshop family. Together, they could build something neither could make alone. Jake took a bite of bread. I keep thinking about your territories. You both want the same star systems, right? Eldorians claim empty space, Vorn said stiffly. Cytherians need breeding. Worlds for survival, Zethkar added. But what if the space isn't really empty, and the worlds aren't really just for breeding? Jake asked. What if there's something bigger you could build together? Helen was staring at Jake with wide eyes. He was definitely breaking the rules now. I mean, Cytherians are amazing at working together. You can organize huge projects and get everyone working toward the same goal. That's incredible. The Cytherians' shells brighten slightly, and Eldorians are brilliant at solving individual problems. Each of you comes up with ideas that nobody else would think of. That's amazing, too. Vorn's colors shifted to pleased yellow. So what if, instead of fighting over who gets which planets, you worked together to make better planets? Cytherians could organize the big projects. Eldorians could solve the technical problems. The room went very quiet. Jake suddenly realized that both alien groups were staring at him. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I'm just a construction guy. I don't know anything about space politics." "No," Zethkar said slowly. "You speak of building. Building is good. Your thoughts have merit," Vorn agreed. "We had not considered ... cooperation." Ambassador Carter looked shocked. The aliens were actually talking to each other instead of just arguing. "There's more food if anyone wants it," Jake offered, trying to change the subject before he got in. More trouble, but something had changed. As they continued eating, the Catherians and Eldorians began asking each other questions. Not about territory or rights, but about how they lived and worked. Jake learned that Catherians built cities underground because they liked enclosed spaces. Eldorians built structures in open space because they needed light and movement. Instead of seeing these as problems, Jake found himself asking why they couldn't do both. Underground cities would protect Eldorian crystals from space radiation, he suggested. Open structures would give Catherian young more room to develop. He added. By the end of dinner, both groups were talking excitedly about possibilities instead of arguing about problems. "This has been most enlightening," Zethkar said as they prepared to leave. "Indeed. Perhaps we should continue these discussions tomorrow," Vorn agreed. After the aliens left, Ambassador Carter turned to Jake. "What just happened here?" she asked. "I think they remembered their people, not just enemies," Jake said. "Jake, you do realize you just did in one evening what trained diplomats have been trying to do for months?" Jake shrugged. "I just offered them some bread and asked them to think about building something instead of tearing it down." Helen shook her head, but she was smiling. "Maybe there's more to diplomacy than I thought." 3 days later, Jake was feeling good about how things were going. The aliens were still talking to each other, which was more than anyone had expected. But then everything went wrong at once. Jake was eating breakfast when the lights in the dining hall flickered and went out. Emergency lighting came on, bathing everything in red. "Attention all personnel," Captain Stone's voice came over the speakers. "We have a critical system failure in the main power grid. All non-essential activities are suspended." Jake found Ambassador Carter in the corridor. She looked worried. "How bad is it?" Jake asked. "Bad enough. If we can't fix the power system, we'll have to evacuate the station. The peace talks will be over." "What's wrong with it?" "Something damaged the main power coupling between sections. It's in the maintenance area between the Catherian and Eldorian quarters." Jake thought about this. Who's fixing it? The station engineers are trying, but it's complex. They need to coordinate repairs on both sides of the coupling simultaneously. It requires perfect timing. "Can I help?" Helen looked at him strangely. "Jake, you're a diplomatic trainee now, not a construction worker. But I know how to fix things. And I know how to coordinate work crews." Before Helen could answer, Captain Stone approached them. "Ambassador, we have a problem. The station engineers can't complete the repairs alone. They need help from both alien technical teams, but the Catherians and Eldorians refuse to work in the same area." "Why?" Jake asked. "The Catherians think the Eldorians will interfere with their group coordination. The Eldorians think the Catherians will suppress their individual creativity. Neither side trusts the other." Jake sighed. "So the station might blow up because they can't share a workspace?" "Essentially, yes." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Jake said. "Can I talk to them?" Ambassador Carter looked like she wanted to say no, but Captain Stone nodded. "At this point, we'll try anything." Jake found both technical teams in their separate areas, preparing their tools. The Catherian engineers moved in perfect formation, each one knowing exactly what the others were doing. The Eldorian engineers worked alone, each focusing on their own part of the problem. "Hey, Jake called out. "Can I talk to everyone?" Both groups looked up. Jake stood where both teams could see him. "I hear you folks are the best engineers in the galaxy. Is that right?" The Cytherians buzzed with pride. The Eldorians flickered bright colors. "Good, because I've got a job that needs the best. The power coupling is damaged in a way that needs fixing from both sides at exactly the same time. Mess. Up the timing by even a second, and the whole thing explodes." Both teams looked interested now. "Here's the problem," Jake continued. "The job needs Cytherian teamwork and Eldorian innovation. But you can't do it from separate rooms. Eldorians will disrupt our coordination," said the lead Cytherian engineer. "Cytherians will suppress our creative solutions," said the lead Eldorian engineer. Jake nodded. "I get it. You're worried about each other messing up your work style. But let me ask you something. What's more important, your work style or getting the job done?" Both engineers looked uncomfortable. "Look, I've run mixed crews before. Different types of workers, different approaches. You know what I learned? The best projects happen when different skills work together, not when everyone does the same thing." Jake pointed to the Cytherians. "You guys are amazing at coordination. You can make sure everyone does their part at exactly the right time. Then," he pointed to the Eldorians, "and you guys are brilliant at solving problems that nobody else can figure out. You can adapt when things don't go according to plan." "But how do we work together without interfering?" the Cytherian asked. "Same way any good crew works together. Clear communication, respect for each other's skills, and focus on the job." Jake pulled out a piece of paper and drew a simple diagram. "Here's what we're going to do. Cytherians, you handle the coordination and timing. Eldorians, you handle the technical problem solving. I'll be the foreman, making sure everyone knows what's happening." "You?" the Eldorian engineer asked. "You are not an engineer." "No, but I know how to run a job site. And right now, that's what we need." Jake led both teams to the damaged area. It was a mess of twisted metal and sparking wires. The power coupling was buried deep in the wall, accessible only from two narrow passages on opposite sides. "Okay," Jake said, looking at the damage. "Eldorians, what's your read on this?" The Eldorian engineers examined the coupling with their instruments. Their lights shifted through different colors as they thought. "The coupling is not just damaged," one reported. "It has been deliberately sabotaged. Someone wanted it to fail in a way that would be difficult to repair." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Sabotage? Who would do that?" "Someone who benefits from continued war," the Eldorian said grimly. "We can fix it," the lead Cytherian engineer buzzed. "But timing must be perfect. If both sides are not synchronized exactly, explosion will destroy entire section." "How exact?" Jake asked. "Within 1/10 of a second," Jake whistled. "That's tight. How do we coordinate that kind of timing?" The Cytherian and Eldorian engineers looked at each other uncertainly. "I have idea," the Eldorian said slowly. "Cytherian coordination combined with Eldorian technical precision could work." "Explain," Jake said. "Cytherians use biorhythmic synchronization for group coordination. All individuals can match same rhythm. If Eldorians could link to this rhythm, we could achieve perfect timing." The Cytherian engineer's shell brightened. "This could work, but requires trust. Eldorians must allow Cytherian group mind to guide timing, and Cytherians must trust Eldorian technical judgment about when timing is critical." The Eldorian added. Jake looked between the two teams. A few days ago, they couldn't stand to be in the same room. Now they were talking about linking their minds. "Are you both willing to try this?" he asked. Both engineers looked nervous, but they nodded. "All right then, let's fix this thing." The next 2 hours were the most intense of Jake's life. He coordinated between the teams, making sure everyone understood their role. The Cytherians established their coordination rhythm, a low, steady buzz that all of them could feel. The Eldorians developed technical solutions for each stage of the repair. Slowly, carefully, the Eldorians began to sync with the Cytherian rhythm. Their lights pulsed in time with the alien buzzing. It was beautiful and strange. Timing critical in 30 seconds, the Eldorian called out. All teams ready, the Cytherian responded. Jake watched the countdown on his tablet. 10 seconds. 5.3.2.1. Now. Both teams moved together in perfect synchronization. Sparks flew as connections were made on both sides of the coupling. Simultaneously, the lights came back on throughout the station, both engineering. Teams cheered or made the equivalent sounds for their species. The Cytherians buzzed with joy. The Eldorians flashed brilliant colors. We did it! Jake shouted, but more importantly, the two alien teams were celebrating together. The Cytherians were sharing their success buzz with the Eldorians. The Eldorians were showing their appreciation by creating beautiful light patterns for the Cytherians to see. Later, as they cleaned up the work area, Jake overheard something that made him smile. Cytherian coordination is most impressive, one Eldorian was saying. Eldorian innovation saved the project, a Cytherian replied. We could not have solved sabotage alone. Maybe we work together again sometime, the Eldorian suggested. Yes. Together, we build better than apart. Ambassador Carter found Jake as he was putting away tools. Jake, what you did today was extraordinary. You got two enemy species to work together and trust each other. I just gave them a job to do together, Jake said. People are people, even when they're not people, if you know what I mean. I'm beginning to understand, Helen said. But Jake, there's something else. Captain Stone found evidence that the sabotage came from someone who profits from the war. There are groups that don't want peace. Jake nodded grimly. Then we better make sure peace happens anyway. After the successful repair, everything changed on Harmony Point. Jake noticed it first in the dining hall. Cytherians and Eldorians were sitting at tables near each other, not together, but not avoiding each other either. They nodded when they passed in the corridors. The formal peace talks resumed, but they were different now. Instead of arguing about old grievances, both sides were asking practical questions. How do your people organize large construction projects? Vorn asked during one session. What techniques do you use for individual problem solving? Zethkar responded. Jake watched from his corner, trying to stay quiet as Ambassador Carter had instructed. But he could see both sides were getting excited about possibilities instead of focused on problems. On the 5th day, Jake was reviewing his notes when Captain Stone approached him. Jake, can I ask you something? Sure, Captain. How did you know the repair would work? Getting two enemy species to cooperate on something that technical? Jake thought about it. Back on Earth, I worked with a lot of different crews. Electricians, plumbers, roofers, painters. They all had different ways of working. But when you give them a clear job and show them how their skills fit together, most people want to do good work. Even enemies? Were they really enemies, or were they just two groups who'd been fighting so long they forgot why they started? Captain Stone was quiet for a moment. That's an interesting perspective. That afternoon, Jake was walking through the station when he heard raised voices from the conference room. He looked through the door and saw both alien groups standing up, looking agitated. Ambassador Carter was trying to calm them down, but it wasn't working. What's wrong? Jake asked as he entered. Someone leaked information about the peace talks to outside groups, Helen said. Both sides are getting pressure from their home governments to end negotiations immediately. Zethkar's shell was dark with anger. War profiteers spread lies about Cytherian weakness. They say cooperation with Eldorians is betrayal of Hive principles. Vorn's colors flashed red and orange. Eldorian military claims we dishonor individual achievement by working with collective species. They threaten to remove us from command. Jake felt his heart sink. Just when things were going well, outside forces were trying to destroy the progress. "So that's it?" Jake asked. "You're going to let people who weren't even here tell you what to do?" Both groups looked at him. "Jake," Ambassador Carter warned. "No, this is important," Jake said. "You two just worked together to fix a sabotaged power system. You saved this whole station. And now some people who sell weapons and profit from war are telling you it was wrong?" "Our governments have concerns," Vorn said stiffly. "Of course they do. Change is scary. But let me ask you something. Are you the same people who came here a week ago?" Zethkar tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "A week ago, you couldn't stand to be in the same room. Today, your engineers are making plans to work together on future projects. A week ago, you were talking about territory and old grudges. Today, you're talking about building new things together." Jake walked to the center of the room. "I've been thinking about your war. 300 years of fighting over star systems and breeding rights and individual honor. But what if the whole war was based on a misunderstanding?" "Impossible," Vorn said. "The historical records are clear." "Are they? Or do they just show what each side thought was happening?" Jake pulled out his tablet and brought up the star charts both sides had shared. "Look at these maps. Cytherians, you call these sacred breeding worlds. Eldorians, you call them empty space ready for colonization. But you're talking about the same planets." Both groups looked at the charts. "Cytherians, when you say sacred breeding worlds, what do you mean exactly?" Zethkar buzzed thoughtfully. "Worlds with proper conditions for raising young. Correct temperature, atmosphere, soil composition. Not necessarily worlds we currently occupy." "And Eldorians, when you say empty space, what do you mean?" "Space not currently claimed or inhabited by other species," Vorn replied. Jake nodded. "So Cytherians need worlds with the right conditions for raising kids. Eldorians need space that nobody else is using. These aren't opposite things." He pointed to the star charts. "What if, instead of fighting over who gets which planets, you work together to make better planets? Planets designed for both your needs?" "How?" both leaders asked at the same time. "Well, Cytherians are amazing at long-term planning and large-scale projects. You could design communities that work for multiple generations. Eldorians are brilliant at individual innovation and adapting to new situations. You could solve the technical problems of terraforming and environmental control." Jake was getting excited now. "Instead of fighting over a few dozen suitable worlds, you could work together to create hundreds of new ones. Worlds designed from the ground up for both species." The room was very quiet. "This would require unprecedented cooperation," Vorn said slowly. "It would require trust," Zethkar added. "Yeah, it would," Jake agreed. "But you've already started. You worked together to fix the power coupling. Your engineers are already making plans for joint projects." Ambassador Carter was staring at Jake with amazement. "The real question is," Jake continued, "do you want to spend the next 300 years fighting the same old war, or do you want to build something new together?" Zethkar and Vorn looked at each other. Really looked, not with suspicion or anger, but with consideration. "There would be many challenges," Zethkar said. "Many opportunities," Vorn replied. "Our governments will resist," Zethkar warned. "Then we must show them the benefits," Vorn said. Jake held his breath as the two leaders continued to talk directly to each other, not through interpreters or formal protocols. "What would you propose as a first joint project?" Vorn asked. "A single World designed for both our needs, Zethkar replied. Proof that cooperation creates better results than conflict. Agreed. But not just any world. It should be in the most disputed system, to show we can work together, even in difficult circumstances. Jake watched in amazement as the two species began planning their first cooperative venture. Ambassador Carter was frantically taking notes, but then Captain Stone's voice came over the speakers. All personnel report to emergency stations. We have multiple ships approaching at high speed. Unknown intentions. Through the conference room's large windows, Jake could see ships arriving. Some had the insect-like design of Cytherian vessels. Others had the crystal and light construction of Eldorian ships. It seems our governments have decided to end these talks forcibly, Vorn said grimly. Military forces from both sides, Zethkar observed. They intend to separate us. Jake looked out at the approaching fleets. All this progress, all this hope, and now it might end in another battle. Not if we don't let them, Jake said. Both. Alien leaders looked at him. You're military commanders, right? Both of you? They nodded, double quotes, so those are your people out there. Your crews, your ships. What if, instead of letting them force you apart, you showed them what you've learned here? How? Vorn asked. Jake smiled. Same way you fixed the power coupling. Together. The approaching fleets formed battle lines on opposite sides of Harmony Point. Jake watched from the observation deck as dozens of warships took positions, weapons charged and shields raised. This is Admiral Corks of the Cytherian Defense Fleet. A voice came over the communication system. Commander Zethkar, you will return to your ship immediately. These negotiations are terminated. This is Fleet Commander Stellax of the Eldorian Navy. Another voice followed. Admiral Vorn, you are ordered to withdraw from this station at once. The Council has declared these talks illegal. Jake stood between Zethkar and Vorn in the communications center. Both alien leaders looked torn between duty to their governments and the progress they had made. They're your people out there, Jake said quietly. What are you going to tell them? Zethkar's shell rippled with indecision. Orders are orders. Cytherian individuals do not disobey the collective will. Eldorian commanders must maintain honor and follow proper authority. Vorn added, his colors dim with conflict. Jake nodded. I get it. Following orders is important. But let me ask you something. What's more important, following today's orders or protecting your people's future? Both leaders looked at him. Those crews out there, they've been fighting this war their whole lives. Their parents fought it. Their grandparents fought it. How many of them have died for star systems that nobody really understands? Jake pointed out the window at the warships. What if, instead of giving them another battle, you gave them hope? What if you showed them there's a better way? The risk is enormous, Vorn said, if we disobey direct orders. If you follow those orders, the war goes on for another 300 years, Jake interrupted. More ships destroyed, more lives lost, more families torn apart. That's not risk. That's guaranteed disaster. Zethkar buzzed thoughtfully. What do you suggest? Talk to them. Not as commanders following orders, but as people who've learned something important. Show them what you've discovered here. Ambassador Carter stepped forward. Jake's right. You have a unique opportunity here. Two fleets, face to face, with leaders who actually understand each other. Jake looked at both alien commanders. What's the worst thing that could happen if you try to make peace? We could be removed from command, Vorn said. Our hives could exile us, Zethkar added. And what's the worst thing that happens if you don't try? Both leaders were quiet for a long moment. The war continues, Zethkar said finally. More death, more destruction? Vorn agreed. Jake nodded. So really, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Zethkar and Vorn looked at each other, then at their fleet's position for battle outside. We do this together? Zethkar asked. Together, Vorn confirmed. They moved to the main communications console. Jake held his breath as both leaders activated. Their fleet channels. All Cytherian vessels. This is Commander Zethkar, the insectoid leader began. I speak to you not just as your commander, but as one who has seen a new possibility for our people. All Aldorian ships. This is Admiral Vorn. The crystalline being added. What I have learned here will change how you think about our enemy. Jake watched the tactical displays as both fleets maintained their positions, weapons ready, but listening. For 300 years, we have fought the Eldorians over breeding worlds, Zethkar continued. We believed they wanted to take what was ours. We were wrong. For 300 years, we have fought the Cytherians over expansion rights, Vorn said. We believed they wanted to restrict our individual achievement. We were wrong. There was silence from both fleets. Jake could imagine the confusion and surprise on those ships. The truth is simpler and more hopeful than we imagined, Zethkar continued. We have been fighting over misunderstandings. The Aldorians do not want to take our breeding worlds. They want to help us create better ones. The Cytherians do not want to suppress our individuality, Vorn added. They want to combine our innovation with their organization to build something greater than either could achieve alone. The fleet communications crackled with overlapping voices as crews on both sides reacted with shock and disbelief. I know this is difficult to accept, Zethkar said. I did not believe it myself until I saw it happen. Watch. On the main screen, they showed video of the power coupling repair. Cytherian and Eldorian engineers working together in perfect coordination. See how their individual creativity solved problems our collective thinking could not, Zethkar narrated. See how our group coordination achieved precision their individual efforts could not match. Together, we accomplished in hours what neither could do alone, Vorn added. Not by abandoning our strengths, but by combining them. Jake watched the tactical displays. The weapons on both fleets were powering down. Ships were moving out of battle formation. You ask us to trust ancient enemies, came a voice from the Cytherian fleet. You ask us to abandon centuries of military doctrine, came another from the Aldorian ships. ZETH single quotes KAR, and Vorn looked at each other, then at Jake. Ahead, Jake encouraged. Tell them the truth. We ask you to trust your own eyes, Zethkar said. In the past week, Aldorian engineers have worked beside Cytherian technicians. We have shared food, shared ideas, shared goals. Not once did they try to harm us or take advantage of us. We ask you to consider your own experience, Vorn added. How many times have you wished for better coordination in battle? How many times have Cytherians wished for more innovative solutions to complex problems? We offer both. But what of our orders? A Cytherian captain asked. Orders come from fear and misunderstanding, Zethkar replied. When those who gave the orders learn what we have learned, they will understand. Our duty is to protect our people. An Aldorian commander said, what better way to protect them than to end a war that has cost so many lives? Vorn responded. Jake stepped up to the microphone. Can I say something? Both fleet commanders looked surprised, but nodded. My name is Jake Martinez. I'm just a construction worker who accidentally became a diplomat. A week ago, I knew nothing about your war or your cultures, but I learned something important. He paused, looking out at the two fleets. You're not enemies. You're two different kinds of people who want the same basic things. Safety for your families, room to grow, respect for who you are. The only reason you've been fighting is because nobody took the time to explain that to each other. Jake's voice carried clearly across both fleets. I've spent my life building things. Houses, bridges, communities. You know what I learned? The strongest structures use different materials that support each other: steel and concrete, wood and stone. Each one alone is good. Together, they're incredible. He gestured to Zethkar and Vorn. These two leaders spent a week learning about each other, not as enemies, but as people with different strengths and the same hopes. Now they're planning to build new worlds together instead of fighting over old ones. Jake looked directly into the communication pickup. The question isn't whether you can trust each other. The question is whether you want your children to inherit this war, or inherit the amazing things you could build together. The communications channels were silent for several long minutes. Jake held his breath, wondering if he had just made everything worse. Then, one by one, ships from both fleets began moving closer to the station. Not in battle formation, but in the careful, curious approach of people who wanted to see something new. "Request permission to come aboard," came a voice from a Catherian ship. "We would like to see this cooperation for ourselves." "Seconded," came a voice from an Eldorian vessel. "If what you say is true, we must learn more." Over the next several hours, Jake watched as engineers, commanders, and crew members from both fleets visited Harmony Point. They saw the repair work, talked to the mixed technical teams, and observed Catherians and Eldorians working together. By the end of the day, representatives from both fleets were making plans for joint projects. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of New Foundation Station, the first jointly built Catherian-Eldorian facility. Through the transparent walls, he could see both species working together on the construction of residential areas designed for both cultures. Ambassador Carter joined him at the window. "How does it feel to have accidentally ended a 300-year war?" she asked. Jake shrugged. "I didn't end anything. I just helped people see they were building the same thing from different directions. The Galactic Council wants to study your methods. They're calling it the Martinez Protocol, using practical cooperation to solve diplomatic deadlocks. That's a fancy name for get people to work together on something useful," Jake said. Through the window, they watched Catherian children and young Eldorians playing together in the station's central garden, the first generation to grow up seeing the other species as friends instead of enemies. "What's next for you?" Helen asked. Jake smiled. "There's a territorial dispute between the Centauri colonies and the Vegan Trade Federation. Apparently, they've been arguing about shipping routes for 50 years. Let me guess, nobody's asked them what they're actually trying to ship, or whether they could share the routes. Probably not, but I figure it's worth a conversation over dinner." As Jake prepared for his next assignment, he thought about something his old construction foreman had told him. Most problems aren't really problems. They're just two groups of good people trying to build something without talking to each other first. Looking out at the thriving station, where former enemies now worked as partners, Jake figured that was probably true throughout the galaxy. In the end, peace wasn't about complex treaties or diplomatic protocols. It was about people realizing they could build something better together than they ever could apart. And sometimes, all it took was someone willing to offer them the tools and the space to try.